Now, this talk came from a Brighton SEO talk that I delivered last September, and I don't normally like to talk about things that I've done that have been great, but actually it was my favourite presentation I've ever delivered, and the feedback was amazing. So we decided today should have been Brighton SEO, so the next event, and 4,000 people that are passionate about SEO and want to learn more would have been descending on Brighton today. So I thought it was a good opportunity to rerun this talk, but actually give it a bit of a facelift for what's going on at the moment. So that's what's happening today. If you're watching and you're not an SEO person, don't worry, don't panic. There's going to be a tiny bit of SEO in there, and I'll try and make sure that it's all spoken about in a way that you're going to understand what I'm talking about. But the heart of this is content. So that's the main part of what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to make a start. Hopefully, if anyone else is still joining, that they'll dive in as we get going. So we're here to talk about how to make your content more human. Now, I don't need to remind anyone of the world that we're living in right now, and we're not gonna go on about that too much. We're all very aware of what's happening and how it's affecting ourselves personally or our businesses. But I guess my number one observation is that being human is at the forefront of all of our minds. So whether that is that we're looking out for our neighbours more, or we're concerned for family members, or actually we're talking to family members that we don't normally talk to as often, like we're setting up these Zoom calls and chatting to them, and actually, yeah, being human is right at the forefront of our minds, and some brands have cottoned onto that, and they're coming with us on this journey, and I think that's what I want to implore all of you to do today. And for me, in a way, we should have always been acting this way. It's one of those skills that we all have, and we have naturally, is to be human. That's who we are. And actually, it sometimes gets forgotten when we're busy and there's lots going on. But actually, we've had a chance to pull back, to not be so busy with everything that's going on around us. So therefore, it's given us that opportunity to make space for it. And it's something that I hope we keep. Now, the good news is that technology is on our side here. Actually, technology is getting more human than it's ever been before. So I want to introduce you to a friend of mine. Many of you will know his face. His name's Bert. So this is Bert. And this is his friend Ernie. Let me set the scene for you. Now, this webinar is not going to be an education in Sesame Street, so don't worry, you're safe there. Although if that's what you were hoping for, now's the time to duck out. But we are going to talk about Bert, and we're going to look at how Bert has become an SEO icon, and how a Muppet has given us the gift of human content, and at a time that we need it more than ever. So what is the Bert update? Well, first of all, what's an update? So for anyone that's not an SEO person here, what's an update? Well, Google does updates to its algorithm all the time. It'll be tweaking it almost on a daily basis. But periodically, there'll be these bigger updates that really get publicized. And there's been many of them over the years. And Bert started to roll out worldwide back in October. Now, Bert stands for Bidirectional Encoder Representations from Transformers. Please don't leave at this point. You don't need to understand what that means. I'm going to tell you what it means in human speak. Now, according to Google, this has been the most important update in the last 5 years. I'd agree. Definitely agree with that. And Google have said, now I won't read this verbatim, but Bert is all around improving language understanding. And in particular, we're talking about natural language, those conversational queries. And if you think about it, we're all starting to search more using voice now as well. So actually that means that we tend to actually say things how we'd say them. Whereas previously we would always kind of type a search phrase as we'd kind of think Google needed us to do it. So Bert's all about this kind of natural language conversational queries and making it easier to understand the nuance and the context of words that we put in as searches. And this particularly helps with those kind of longer conversational queries. And the aim that Google's got by introducing Bert into the algorithm is that it wants us all to be able to search in a way that feels natural to us and not have to think, oh, how should I search for what I'm looking for? This is awesome news, and it really is awesome news, because it means we can be more human, not just in how we search, but in how we write our content. So how does it work? Now, I love this quote. This is a brilliant quote from a linguist back in 1957, John Rupert Firth. "You shall know a word by the company it keeps." And never were it so true when we start to look at how BERT works. So let me pop some examples on screen here. Now, these are some words that us as humans, the second we hear this sentence, we understand how this word works in this sentence. So right, for example, you were right, versus make a right turn at the light. We understand that straight away, but actually previously computers haven't necessarily been able to understand that context and see how, because of the word that sits before and sits after it, it changes what the meaning of the word is. And that's what BERT does for Google, is it's allowed this to start to happen. Now here's an example. Now this is actually an example that Google put out when they first announced the BERT update. So this was a search that someone might have done. So they might have searched, can you get medicine for someone pharmacy? Now on the left, we've got the before. So before BERT had rolled out, Google would have given you getting a prescription filled from an encyclopedia about medicine. Afterwards, you can see Google's really understood the intention of the search. So the fact that can you get medicine for someone pharmacy means that actually we're trying to pick up medicine for someone else and we're trying to see if it's possible. And it's given us, can a patient have a friend or family member pick up a prescription? How awesome is that? Look at the difference there. And that was an overnight difference by bringing BERT into the algorithm. So we need to be focusing on the human that sits behind the search phrase. We can get so wrapped up in the algorithm, and in the past that's led to really bad content where people just fill it with keywords and they're just trying to cheat the algorithm and get to number one. And actually they're forgetting about humans and forgetting that to truly be good as a content creator, our job is to spark action from users. That is what we're trying to make happen, be that to buy our product or buy our service or to follow us on social. It could be anything, but you want to be memorable. Now, I believe by understanding humans, it's going to make us all better at SEO. So I've got a question for you all. Now, normally I get you to put your hands up, but I'll just let you have a think of the answer yourself. How well do you know your audience? So do you really understand what makes them tick? Do you really understand why they buy your product? How well have you profiled that, and how well do you use that in the work that you do and the marketing that you do? So we're going to play a little game. Again, you're going to have to play this on your own. So I'm going to describe two people, and I want you to just have a think if you can work out who I might be describing. So they both live in London. They're both between 30 and 40 years of age. They're both millionaires. Would be nice, wouldn't it? And they're both parents. So I'll let you think for a second. I mean, I'll tell you, when I've used this slide before, I think someone's got one of them right, but no one's ever got them both right. So let me put you out of your misery. The two people that I've described there are Skepta and Prince William. I'll let that sit with you for a second. Skepta and Prince William. Now, you don't often see Skepta and Prince William sitting side by side. But what we've just done there is we've used demographics. I've explained to you in demographics these two people. And often in marketing, we use demographics. We use demographics to pick our audience and to decide on targeting, decide on messaging. But actually, this clearly shows us how that can send us really wrong, because the message that you would put out to attract Skepta versus Prince William would be really different. We're not going to be saying the same thing to grab both of their attention. They're very different people. And the truth is, we're all different. So today is about helping to reinvigorate your editorial flair. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, I've never had editorial flair, don't worry, we're going to give you some today. And we're going to try and keep SEO at the forefront. And the great news is that by recognizing that BERT and Google love and understand human content, we can do that. We can keep SEO at the forefront without needing to do much else. And right now, we need human content more than ever before. We need to be thinking about our audience and empathizing with them and being authentic for them. So let's watch some website content in real life. So Katie in our team recorded a little video for us. So this is some content we found online. And please don't switch off. I'll put you out of your misery before it gets too boring.
Across our network of showrooms, we stock vehicles from quality car makers: Toyota, Nissan, Volkswagen, Renault, Dacia, and Audi. We provide top quality, brand new and approved used cars, along with excellent after-sales services. We have locations in Ashford, Bristol, Bromsgrove, Canterbury, Cardiff, Coulson, Dartford, Gatwick, Gloucester, Hereford, Waltham, Maidstone, Newbury, Newport, Oxford, Reading, Sandwich, Stratford, Tunbridge Wells, and Worcester.
Wow, let's end that there, because we don't speak like that, do we? Well, at least I don't, and none of my friends do. But for some reason, lots of businesses create content like that. So I want you to think differently about content. I want you to take a new focus, a human focus. And why? Well, without this, I believe you're failing your audience. And actually, you're failing yourself, because this can help you unlock more sales, more a wider audience, a more connected audience. This can do so much for you if you can get your language right and if you can understand your audience better. Now, economists have realized that people don't always respond predictably or rationally to things like price and value. Now, on the right here, I've got a load of books, some of the best ones out there, and there's tons though. There are so many that describe and go into the theory behind some of these ideas. And neuroscientists have discovered that all decisions are weighed up emotionally, even those ones that we truly believe are logical ones. So, you know, when you make a really important business-to-business decision and you feel like you've been really logical about it, the truth is it came from emotion first. And digital marketing has become so measurable. But is that focus at the expense of the content? And actually, more important, is that focus at the expense of your audience? So I'm going to need to add a check to your content writing process. So your content writing process might go something like this. You're going to define your market. You're going to know who it is that you're talking to. And within that market, you're going to define those audiences. And you're going to really think about whether there's one or two or however many you're targeting. Then you might do some keyword research. And if you're not doing this part, you should be if you're creating content online, because it is important that we understand how people search and where the volume sits in how people search, because sometimes we can become a bit too reliant on thinking we know how people refer to our business, but actually that's not necessarily how people do. So we do the keyword research, and then we might map that to our sales funnel. So we might say, right, we've got these keywords here. These sit in the awareness phase where people are trying to understand their needs, etc. And then these ones are when they're more likely to buy, etc. So you map them along, and then you know how you can create your content to match up with intent. And then this is the bit that probably most of you out there aren't doing at the moment. And this is the bit that I want to interrupt into your process. So we're gonna try and uncover audience motivations. We're going to try and understand what motivates our audience to do something. And then we're going to see how we can use that in writing our content. And then you can carry on with your new normal process using all of the above. So I've got another job that I would normally get you to do, chatting to the person next to you. But if you've got a notepad around or on your phone, I just want you to take the next minute while I'm chatting to write down a couple of words about what's most important to you about your career. Now, we're looking for one-word answers. So this might be, it might be money. That's fine if you want to put money. It might be advancement, achievement. It might be nurturing a team member. Could be any of these types of things, and it'll be individual and personal to all of us, but just write a couple of words down as I'm talking. And I'm going to then share with you now the persona model that Lab have built. So Lab are our parent agency, and they have built a persona model that is called Monkey Lion Dog. Sorry, Q&A has popped up on my screen, and I'm just trying to take it down so that I can see the slides for you all properly. There we go. So this is Lab's unique persona model, Monkey Lion Dog. Now, playful in its name, but absolutely amazing in its thinking that goes into it. So it takes 4 or 5 different psychology models, and they've pulled it into one. So at the bottom here, you've got a URL that you can go to. Now, once we've finished the webinar, go and take a look at that and take the test and find out where you sit on monkey, lion, dog. But as I walk you through this, those words that you've just written down about your career, you might be able to plot those into monkey, lion, or dog and start to see from a work perspective where you sit. So monkey is all about contextual. So monkeys want to understand their place in the world. So they really have a fear of being ignored, and their values sit around status, recognition, purpose. We then have our lion. So lion is the rational part of our brain. So lion represents your customer's desire to be competent and to get our intentions met. And their values really sit around achievement and mastery. And then we've got the dog. And the dog is the emotional part of our brains. So this represents our need to be connected, whether that's to our family, friends, our team, the community around us. And here we're really looking for kind of affiliation and authenticity. Now, this is a model. You're not going to just sit in one of these boxes. You will be across all of them, most likely, but you will be likely to have a skew in particular to one. And that might change. You might be more of a monkey at work, but actually more of a dog at home, for example. So it will change. Now, I'm going to pop on screen here. I'm going to run you just through monkey, lion, and dog again with a bit more detail, which might help you pick out some of the words that you've written down. So monkey from a contextual point of view, we've got things like purpose and curiosity and attention, status, those kind of words. Then the lion, so this is your rational thinking, so achievement, mastery, knowledge, competency, those types of words. And then dog, the emotional side, so those relationships, the loyalty, the trust, openness. So how do we make our content more human? Well, the idea is that we try and use those motivations. We try and understand the frame of mind that our customers are in when they're interested in our product, our services, our brand in general, and use that within our content to make it more human. And when we run persona workshops with clients, the output is always amazing. And sometimes you start it and you think, oh, I don't know what we're going to get from this. But by the end of it, what you've uncovered is something completely different and new that we weren't expecting to find about an audience. So, for example, recently we worked with a software provider, and we started to uncover that the practice manager in firms would be driven by actually their own kind of monkey drivers, so wanting to stamp their mark on the fact that they brought this software into the business and using it as a way to elevate their position and to be noticed more by those around them. So actually suddenly something that marketing would normally be, our software does X, Y, and Z, feature, benefit, etc., can suddenly come back to being more about the individual that's buying it and how it can further your career by putting this in place. So how do we make it more human? And what's the impact going to be? Well, the first part is connection with your audience. And that's the number one for the world we're in right now, is by making your content more human and bringing more of those motivations into your content, it's going to allow you to connect better with your audience. It's going to help with rankings. So we now will understand how BERT fits into this. And therefore, by writing more human content, it is going to have an impact. You will need to be doing more SEO work around it. Just writing human content doesn't mean a number one ranking, but it is going to help. And it's going to bring increased conversions. And to be honest, we definitely always want this. So more sales, more leads into the business by connecting with our audience better, understanding them better, and being able to drive them through a path better. So we're going to look at neuro-driven content. And I'm going to run you through 4 types of language. Now we're going to start with uninspiring language, and you're going to hear me talk about this a bit more before the end, and I might also refer to it as boring. And it's boring language. It's where we're not being descriptive and we're not being engaging. And you're going to be amazed at how often it's used, and I've got some stats to share with you on that. Now, I bet most of us might be criminal at one time or another of creating content like that video I played. And especially the SEOs out there, where back in the day, you were just creating content to try and get to the number 1 in Google. You weren't worrying about your audience and you were just churning out keywords, etc. And we've all done it, but we need to stop doing it and we need to start putting that human first. And how do we do that? So first of all, we need to remember that our content needs to be sticky. We need to hold that user's attention in a world where we're so busy in the normal world. And actually, even right now, even with just staying in your own home, I think we all still feel quite busy a lot of the time. Therefore, giving our attention to something, it really needs to warrant that attention. So therefore, it needs to be sticky. And it needs to be memorable. So people don't make a decision the first time they come to your website. Sometimes they might do, but not often. So therefore, we need to be memorable. We need to stick around in their minds so that when they're ready to make a decision, and in the current scenario, that might be as things start to go back to normal, they need to remember you and your brand. And the key to memory is evoking emotion. If we want to be remembered, we need to peak an emotion. We need to get someone feeling something about our brand or our content. So secondly, we're going to look at the balance between self-obsessed and selfless language. So what do I mean here? So we need to ensure that our content is outside in versus inside out. So let's break that down. So outside in would be me talking about our customers' challenges and the things that they face, and then how we're the solution to it, versus just being in broadcast mode and just telling everyone what we do and not really thinking about our audience. And thirdly, we're going to look at static versus dynamic language. Well, static language is content that's in the now. It's in the present of what's going on. It's features and benefits led. Whereas dynamic language is looking to the future. It's looking at impact. What's going to happen by this happening? If you buy this, what's your future going to look like, for example? Now, you may not realize it, but through content, you have a lot of power. Let me take you to Florida. Well, actually, that's definitely not possible right now. So instead, let me introduce you to John Barge. Now, he in 1996 ran an experiment that's become known as the Florida effect. Now, he took two groups of people, and both groups had the same exercise. They were given sheets of paper that had words written on them, single words, and they had to create sentences. And as a group, once they'd done this and made their sentences with these pieces of paper, they had to leave the room, walk down a corridor, go into another room, sign a piece of paper, and then they could go. Now, these were young people. These were university kind of age students. And group one were given totally random words. Group two, though, they also believed they had random words, but actually dotted into those random words were words that made you think of old people. So we had bald, wrinkled, Florida, because that's in the US where all the older people go and live, apparently. So we had words like that. Now, they were being primed with those words. And what the researchers were looking at and what they found was that the difference between group one and group two's behaviour had changed when they walked down that corridor to leave. They had taken on the persona of an older person. They walked slower. It had embodied their movement because they had been primed with words that made them think of old people. That is a lot of power that you have by words that you choose, and I think that's so impactful as a study, and it really makes us think that actually we might churn a piece of content out and just want to get it out there, but actually really thinking about the types of words we use and how those words can prime a behavior is really important. And then finally, we're just going to touch on visual, auditory, and kinesthetic language. So what do I mean by this? So visual is I see what you mean. Auditory is I hear what you're saying. And kinesthetic is it feels to me like. So we will all have a preference to one of these, and you might not know your preference. You'd need to have a look at some of your content and really analyze it to work that out. But ideally, we want to have a balance across visual, auditory, and kinesthetic language, because you don't know your audience and where their bias is going to sit. And we want to make sure that we're appealing to everybody in the content that we write and that it's connecting with them. So we need to learn how to master content that sparks emotion. And most importantly, it sparks action. Now, it's like Christmas today, Christmas in April. I've got a gift for you, and some of you may have seen this before. So we built a website, and this is a completely free tool to go and use. So if you've not seen it, you must go and check it out. ratemycontent.co.uk. And into Rate My Content, you can pop content that you've just written, or you can put a web page. And it's going to scan through that. You can also tell it what your brand name is, so that it allows it to see how often you're talking about your own brand. And it's going to give you 4 scores on that content. So the first score it will give you, and this is where we're going to start to talk about boring, so I do apologise if you see a boring score, but this is our borometer, and you will see either boring, okay, or engaging, and obviously we're aiming for that engaging score. We then have our static and dynamic score. Now this is shown via the tarot cards. So you will either see the present, which is going to be for static, or the future, which is going to be for dynamic. Or you may see both, which means you've balanced. Now, there is no right or wrong here, whereas obviously with boring content, we know we don't want to be there. But when it comes to static and dynamic, it really depends on the type of content and what you were hoping to get. So the score is more an indication, and for you to then think, was this more about the now, or was I hoping to inspire people about impact in the future? It's then also going to give you a selfish and selfless score. So this is depicted by the guy either handing all of his candy floss over, so that's selfless, hanging on to it all and being selfish, or sharing it and then being balanced between the two. And again, it's going to depend on your content here. If it's an About Us page, you might expect it to be selfish. But if it's a page where you really want to put your customer at the forefront and see why they should be buying your product or service, then we want to make sure that that's up front. And then finally, you're going to get your visual, auditory, and kinesthetic scores. So you will see how many words that you've got for visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And then you will also see on the scale where it sits. So this is looking at the proportion of those words against your content. And ideally, again, we're looking for balance here. So we decided to test a couple of websites through this. Now, this was done the back end of last year, so these sites might have upped their game. They may have seen my talk previously, but I just wanted to show you how websites that we think should be performing maybe aren't from a content perspective. So we all know a Porsche 911, whether you're into your cars or not. Beautiful car, absolutely gorgeous, and you could be really descriptive about it. But somehow Porsche hit on a boring score. So they've got all those beautiful features and descriptive words that they could use to bring it to life, and yet somehow they've made a Porsche boring. We've then got the static score. So this is that they are sitting more in the present and they're not looking at the future. Now, with something that is very features and benefits or specification based, we can expect to see it sitting in the present maybe. But there is opportunity that you could inspire your audience to think about life with a Porsche and what it's going to mean to drive down that road with that engine roaring. We've then got a selfish score. So they're talking about themselves too much and talking about the brand, and they're not really talking about their audience and the user. And then finally, we've got our visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So they've nailed it on visual. They've got a few on kinesthetics, so they're okay, but they've missed auditory. I mean, I've already used one there, roar. You can hear a Porsche roar. That would have been a great word to include. So they've missed out there a little bit. Once you're buying a car, you're going to need to buy car insurance. Now, car insurance is pretty boring, like compared to a car. This is the boring part. This is the, oh, we've got to have insurance. But actually, compare the market, they've nailed it. They hit an engaging score. They've nailed it. They've made insurance engaging. They've made it descriptive. We then have a dynamic score. So they've managed to make people think about the future and think about life with their product in it. So they've nailed that as well. They're selfless as well. They've put their customer at the forefront of this content. And then finally, on the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, they've kind of let us down a little bit here. So we've got some visual, we've got some auditory, we've got no kinesthetic, but actually across the other three, they've absolutely nailed it. So we then, this tool's been live since September and lots of people have been using it. So I've started to pull out the stats and we've started to categorize the stats, and I thought I'd share some of them with you today as a bit of an exclusive. So we've had over 650 B2B web pages run through Rate My Content. And these are our top line results so far. And they are going to shock you. So be ready. Make sure you're sitting down. So 45% of B2B content scored boring. 45%. And maybe business to business, we expected it to not be great, but 45% are not engaging their user. They're not being descriptive about things, and they're not using all that lovely vocabulary we've got to bring things to life. And only 13% of them achieved the engaging score. So the rest were sitting in that okay middle ground. 70% of B2B content was static. So we're not telling our audience by buying our service, by buying our product, this is the impact, this is what you can expect next. And 40% was selfish. So 40% of those pages that have come through have been talking too much about themselves and not enough about their audience. And then on the consumer side, we've analysed 100 kind of entertainment and leisure websites. Now, from a B2C point of view, we really should be engaging. We should be even more free to use language that's more engaging and emotional, etc. But actually, this is the shocker, it's got worse. 52% of these sites achieved a boring score. 52% when we're talking about entertainment and leisure and all the exciting things that can go on with that. And 82% of this content was static. And 48% selfish. So again, talking too much about themselves. They're quite shocking results, aren't they? Now, we're building up more and more of this content, and we're running more websites through this ourselves. And obviously, I implore any of you to come and put your pages through here. And my plan over the coming weeks is to run some more specific webinars on B2B, for example, or entertainment and leisure. Once we've got more and more data, and then to actually look at doing a deep dive on some of this content. And if you want, you can put yourselves forward to have your content deep dived on a live webinar. And what we'll do is we'll try and bring some of these ideas to life, and I'll try and show you how we make the content better. So how would we take it from a boring score and get it to an engaging score, and practically what does that content then look like? So if anyone wants to follow up with me afterwards and would like their website put forward for that, then by all means just drop me a message. So now is the time to revisit your content. Some of us have more time on our hands than others right now because business has slowed a little bit, and therefore we might have that time to rethink about content. And you must put your users' motivations first. So think back to Monkey Lion Dog. Think what it is that drives them to be interested in what you do and to buy your services, or to at least just follow your brand, to be affiliated with you. What are those motivations? Now I'm going to give you some top 10 tips. So this is kind of going back over everything I've said. These are the tips. So number one, we need to be more descriptive and fun. We need to play with our language. Humans love descriptive words. They're so much more engaging to read. So think about how you can do that. Think about bringing emotion to your content. What feelings does your product and service evoke? And is there a way to use it? And even if you're B2B, there's still feelings involved. Remember what I said earlier, every decision we make is emotional first. So even when we think this is a real rational purchase, there's something emotional going on there. Uncover it and use it. Tip 3, be outside in, not inside out. So make sure you're thinking about your audience's challenges first before broadcasting what you do. So make sure you're placing them in the forefront and then showing how you answer that. And think about context. So this is kind of on your dynamic and static. Don't just explain features. Think about the impact. What's next? Try and balance the two. And then consider how you can use visual language. And we've got some examples on screen here. And then auditory language. And also don't forget kinesthetic language. We need to be using those types of words. And balance. Remember, with BERT in place, Google understands context more than they ever have done before. So ensuring that we've got that right balance between human first content and the signals that Google's looking for is absolutely fundamental, because human first needs to be your number one priority. And motivations. Remember monkey, lion, dog. Remember, we're trying to attract the attention of humans. So you need to think about what their intrinsic motivations are and think about how you can use this to draw them in through your content and to drive them down a conversion path. And then finally, remember the old people. Well, they weren't old, were they? They were young people, but they took on the persona of an old person, the actions of an old person through the words that they read. They were primed. So remember that power that you have in the words that you choose to use, and be really aware of it and think how you can use that. So let me tie this all together. We've learned about humans and how we can think about their motivations first. We've learned about language, but hopefully not in a boring English lesson way. We've learned that we need to be more colourful with our language, to be sticky, to be memorable, and to evoke emotion. And that we need to balance ourselves and our audience, and we need to make sure we get that right. And we need to balance the why and the what of the current situation with the future, and that's so what. We need to balance detail with context, because humans like both, and we will have a preference on one or the other. And finally, we need to be really conscious to use a variety of visual, auditory, and kinesthetic language. So on that note, it has been great to see you all today. Thank you for listening. I really hope that you've heard at least one thing that you can implement within your content. And I hope I've been able to shift your view on content, and that I've made an impact on how you think and how you interact with others. So, Annie, how did we do? Yeah, we did all right, didn't we? Cool. So I'm going to jump into the questions in a second. You can download the slides at reflectdigital.co.uk/human. There will be a recording of this webinar, which we'll be sharing as well. And most importantly, go and rate your content. Go and see how you stack up, and don't be defeated if you get a boring score. Have a look at it and think about all the things I've just explained and how can you turn that round. So you can find me on Twitter at Becky Reflect. You can find me on LinkedIn, Becky Simms, or you can drop me an email, becky@reflectdigital.co.uk. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this session, and I'd also love to hear if you'd like your website dissected in a future webinar. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm going to have a little look at all of these questions. So bear with me. Thank you all so much for listening. So we've got a couple of questions so far. What languages does the tool support? So a really practical question. At the moment, this is actually only in English. So Rate My Content is only going to work for our English speaking friends out there. But that is something, if it becomes popular enough, maybe we will bring it on further. And then we've got, so I wonder, as we have BERT now, how important using exactly the keywords we find in order to get the right traffic through. So that's a really important question, and it's one that Google's been working on for many years, from how they're able to understand words. So there's something within the algorithm that looks at semantic indexing and how to understand words in context. So obviously we've got BERT that's helping us understand that in sentence structure, but actually for years now, Google's been able to understand if I said sea and I said sand, it would understand that I was talking about the beach. It wouldn't need me to say beach. Obviously, it would be a bit silly if you wanted a rank for a term that mentioned beach to not mention beach, but Google would understand that. So I think now we have BERT in place that further develops that idea. But I do think it's still important that we understand how our customers refer to our business, how our customers refer to our service, and make sure that we can use those words in what we're writing about, because the more we can match up with that, the better chance we've got of succeeding, and also of matching up with what the customer's looking for, because if that's how they speak, we need to make sure our content does align. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy your Friday. Everyone have a good, safe weekend at home, and I will be sharing some more details on our upcoming webinars in the coming days. Thank you so much.